maybe the greatest shot our sport's ever seen. One guy over there has 3 arms and one guy over there has 3 legs. If I want racket head speed, a ton of stress on your forearm to get that sucker around, it's a very short swing where he'd load here and boom.
Using the serve, comes back awkwardly deep, and it's Roddick that's immediately on the defensive.
15-3-4 opening set.
What's going on, guys? It's Coach Steven with 15 Points of Tennis, and if you follow this channel long enough, you probably would have guessed, like many of you, I'm a big Roger Federer fan. And the reason why I love Roger Federer is, in my mind, he's the first player to have mastered and gotten technically perfect every aspect of the game. And he should be really the blueprint for every player moving forward. And so obviously this channel, we try to give you a look under the hood, see what's really going on with this game. I mean, I see people drawing all these kind of weird graphs around Roger. I'm like, what the heck is that? All right, but reality is complicated, okay? I'm trying to break it down for you. So if you really have watched him closely, Federer evolved over the years. And one of the shots that actually evolved was his signature shot, the forehand. Okay, his forehand in 2005 looked different from 2013, looked different than how it is in today, 2018. And so today we're gonna actually look at these iconic forehands, compare and contrast them, and then we're gonna help understand, based on what we learned, how you can modify your forehand to give yourself the desired result, okay, be able to create that result on command. Now, before we continue, hit that like, subscribe button. That bottom right-hand corner takes about 3 seconds. I know I mentioned some of my best stuff is yet to come out. It's no joke, it's no lie. My best stuff is yet to come out. I'd hate for you to miss it. Okay, now, to preface this video moving forward, I will have to say that you have to understand that everyone's body mechanics essentially work the same, right? Like, unless one guy over there has 3 arms and that other dude has 3 legs, how we generate power and use energy, it's going to be exactly the same because we have the same anatomy. The kinetics work the same. What works for you is going to work for me. With that being said, though, is everyone's swing, even if it's technically correct, everyone's swing will look different because some people have larger torsos, longer legs, those different body types. Okay, some people have stronger upper bodies, stronger lower bodies, right? Even things like your racket, the aerodynamics of your racket influence how your swing develops, the grip size in your grip. There's so many factors, okay, that make a difference. Now, in this video in particular, we're going to talk about exclusively the upper body kinetics. Again, of all the factors, we're going to talk about upper body kinetics. And if you haven't watched my video on the kinetic chain, again, the kinetic chain is one of the most fundamental basic, and it's, again, the essentials to understanding the swing. So if you haven't watched that video, please go find my kinetic chain video somewhere on YouTube. Again, it's how the power passes like dominoes in the body from joint to joint to joint, all the way to contact and culminating at contact. But again, we're going to focus on the upper body kinetics and what makes that different in between players. So to recap, okay, we're going to look at 3 joints. First joint is the shoulder. See how the shoulder rotates to create this circle? The other joints are straight, so a circle with my shoulder. Next is the elbow, which makes a circle. That's the second joint. The last joint is the wrist, which makes a circle. Now, these 3 circles, I put them together: shoulder, elbow, wrist. Shoulder, elbow, wrist. That creates the upper body kinetics. Now, a little anatomy lesson for you guys, because this will be important later in the video. All right, wrist is controlled by which muscles? The front side forearm, back side forearm. Elbow controlled by the bicep, tricep. Shoulder, again, a few muscles that control this joint: deltoid, lat, scapula, pectoral, right here. So So all our muscles, okay, understand this, all our muscles essentially extend, contract, extend, contract. That's how they move. When you look at the difference between players, okay, we're going to talk about the upper body. Some players get more extension on the wrist. And what I call that is a wrist dominant swing. When someone gets more extension on the wrist, see how visible that is? Boom, how much the racket tip is moving. Some players get more extension on the shoulder. So you see them taking a bigger backswing. And what I mean by extension is this increased range of motion here. All right, and we're going to break down the shoulder swing versus the wrist dominant swing. And so when I look at Roger Federer, and we're going to show you some clips in a sec, okay? When you look at Roger Federer in 2003 to 2006, Roger Federer has what I call a more shoulder dominant swing. You'd see him take the racket a little higher over his head. His backswing would be a little slower. His windup would be a little bit bigger here, all right? And consequently, he'd hit through the ball a little bit more instead of putting more brush. He'd a little bit more through the ball, more penetrating, and a little flatter through the court. This is perhaps my favorite Federer forehand. It's just so silky smooth. And then Roger used the K, and he used the BLX Pro Staff, the 90. And what happened is in 2013, we're going to show you some clips, is his swing got visibly added much more. You can call it excessive, you can call it wrist whip or wrist lag. And instead of taking this bigger backswing here, again, it was still pretty quick. But instead of taking that slightly bigger backswing, he'd really have a fast tempo swing, and it is very short and fast tempoed. So this was a big shift in his game, big modification. Now compared to the previous clips from 2005 where Roger kept the swing a little straighter, okay, and hit through the ball flushed a little bit more, now you can see the accentuated wrist whip right before and prior to contact. Obviously, with the wrist swing, he'd hit more spin as well. Now, if you didn't get that, that comparison between the two Federer forehands, think about this, okay? Juan Martín del Potro, okay? I'm going to use even more extreme examples just so you get this. Juan Martín del Potro has more of a shoulder-based swing. Again, you can see the racket visibly going up, down, and up, right? And Juan Martín hits that ball like he wields his racket like a sledgehammer. Okay, versus Jack Sock. Jack Sock flips that thing around like a ping pong paddle. All right, both these guys are really strong. Okay, but with Jack Sock, you see just a ton of wrist motion, a ton of wrist lag, a ton of wrist whip. Now, don't be fooled, because when I talk about shoulder extension here versus wrist extension, both Juan Martín del Potro and Jack Sock use all three muscles big time on their forehands, right? So when through contact, Delpo is still really using that forearm and wrist through the ball here. And when Jack Sock loads, Jack really loads that shoulder big time here. Okay, so they're still using all three muscles. I'm talking the difference between extension, okay, versus utilization, right? So you're using all three muscles. The extension is a little bit different. So we're going to get down to the nitty gritty, and this is important for your stroke, because how you choose to build your stroke over time is going to make a difference, okay? We're going to talk about the pros and cons between the shoulder and wrist dominant swing in the next few minutes. So here's some examples of these guys' forehands. So Delpo is the first one we'll look at, and I want you to notice that the racket path and the racket head movement is largely controlled by, again, the rotating the shoulder. Okay, and we'll show you Jack Sock in a sec, but these are going to be very different forehands. Now, a lot of times the shoulder-based swings are going to hit the ball slightly further from your body. You're not going to put quite as much spin. Whereas the slightly more wrist-dominant swing, again, like you see Jack Sock, you're going to hit it slightly closer to your body. Okay, you won't get as much shoulder extension either. Okay, but the wrist extension, again, you see that crazy amount. I mean, Jack Sock must have a crazy strong forearm as well in order to execute this and not get tired. All right, so the shoulder dominant swing. Okay, the shoulder dominant swing is a little bit slower. It has a little less racket head speed. Now, why is that? All right, now we talk about different strokes, and we apply this to all the concepts on all the other strokes. So really get this. This is fundamental. When you move the shoulder, I'm trying to move my shoulder back and forth. Watch the racket head tip. There's only so fast I can move the tip here. Okay, if I want racket head speed, all the racket head speed is contained in the tip. If I want true racket head speed, I'm going to move my wrist more. This is racket head speed here. This is not racket head speed. All right, so on a shoulder swing, when you get less wrist extension, more shoulder extension, what actually happens here? Well, you get less racket head speed, but what are the benefits? You get a little bit more, in my mind, okay, it's a little easier to time and stabilization. And the thing is, where is this, do we see this really effective? Well, when you're deflecting balls that are really hard, when balls are coming really hard at you, you're going to use a more shoulder-based swing. You're going to keep the wrist much more firm, okay, boom, and you're going to see the shoulder push through the ball more, okay? Same thing with the backhand. Boom, boom, you see how the wrist doesn't move much? And the shoulder, you see the shoulder extension through the shot, okay? And this is, so for deflecting hard balls, second of all, when I'm creating a lot of momentum. So irregardless of whether I use a lot of wrist extension or a little bit of wrist extension, just having a lever that builds momentum from here versus from here, obviously if I'm taking a bigger backswing, I'm going to be able to over time build momentum up until contact. So you see Fernando Gonzalez, right? If you remember, he had one of the biggest forehands on tour, take a very big backswing here. So if you remember Gonzo's forehand, again, one of the biggest forehands we've ever seen, he got a little extra shoulder extension compared to most players, which help him, again, take big cuts of the ball and wind up. And especially if the ball's a little bit slower and softer, it might be a good idea to take a slightly bigger backswing. Even like if you compare Roger Federer's backhand to Dominic Thiem's backhand, Roger actually has a pretty short, he doesn't get a whole ton of shoulder extension on his backhand. Right, he keeps it pretty tight and pretty small, and then he exposes from here. Whereas you see Dominic Thiem, especially on the slow balls, you see him taking the racket all the way. You see again the shoulder extension up and back. He gets a lot more shoulder, and he takes a much bigger cut at the ball because he gets that shoulder extension. He really crushes that slow ball and that high ball. Okay, so that's the shoulder dominant swing. Now the wrist dominant swing. We're going to show you how these relate. Because, like I said, you're moving the tip more with your wrist here, you're going to see, again, from a visible standpoint, you're going to see a lot more wrist lag, wrist whip, okay, and you're going to get more racket head speed. And with that racket head speed, you're going to get, one, you're going to get more spin, and two, you're going to get more velocity. So you would think that a wrist dominant swing is better in all cases. Not true, but I'll tell you where it's good. A wrist dominant swing is great if you're going to put away short balls or really accelerate through the ball when the ball is a little softer in the court. So imagine this, right? Short ball comes, nice easy ball. There's not much pace on it, and I'm doing a more shoulder-based swing here, like this, as if I were blocking or deflecting a ball. A shoulder-based swing here, here. There's no way I can put the short ball away. No way. There's not enough racket speed to put the ball through the court, right? So if I want to really put the ball through the court, again, I'm going to use a lot more wrist and elbow extension. So these two last joints here, boom, boom, right? And that right there, that's the racket head speed. That's going to create spin and speed to put the ball away. So on short balls when the ball's soft, you even see players who even they have a shoulder-based swing. When the ball's low, you see them visibly use a lot more wrist. And why? Because they need to access a much heavier topspin to get the ball up and down, to really dip and bend that ball in the court because it's low. If it's low and soft, again, you're going to see a lot more wrist to get maximum spin. Now look, the wrist dominant swing, fantastic for certain scenarios. But imagine you are hitting a return. And I say return because A return is the most extreme case of a heavy ball. It's an extreme case, right? If I'm hitting a return, you see Fed hit a return, you see the shoulder pushing through the ball more like this, and you see the wrist stay much more quiet as he's pushing through the ball in a return or here, right? Imagine if someone's hitting a return at you and you try to flick it with your wrist. First of all, that's incredibly hard to time because of the racket head speed. Second of all, it's going to put so much stress on your forearm. Crazy amount of stress. So I know for me, like if you hand fed me balls, so remember a hand fed ball has very little weight on it, right? If you fed me hand fed balls, I can use a wrist dominant swing pretty easily and look pretty good. But if you started like drilling balls into my strokes and hitting them heavy, well, I know at least for me, over time, my wrist dominant swing would break down. Again, so much stress on that forearm. Again, it depends how strong you are, but a wrist dominant swing is always more likely to break down. Okay? Now, I do not endorse these as great forehands because I hit a two-handed forehand. I don't practice my one-hand forehand at all, but look, off a hand feed, just showing you an exaggerated wrist motion. Again, this is an exaggerated wrist dominant swing with the continental grip. Alright, now, there's a little too early. I had to wait and then stay in rhythm and hit still. Okay, but that's compared to what you see here as the shoulder-based swing. And yes, if I were to choose these two forehands, I prefer to use this as a regular swing. Over-rotated on that one, so I gotta fix that. Okay, keep my upper body a little more quiet and my hips from over-rotating. But yes, if I was rallying, people were hitting hard at me, I would probably choose this forehand. Now I want to get this across to you that the shoulder versus wrist dominance doesn't just work on the forehand like we demonstrated. This goes for all shots. All right, let's say someone crushed the ball and it's a low and I'm hitting a backhand slice, right? If I'm really deflecting the ball off someone who ripped the ball, so watch here, I'm going to use more shoulder and keep my wrist more firm. So I'm going to, right, just to block that ball back. But if it was a softer slice where I'm trying to knife it and get more snap on the ball, now you see how I'm going to automatically engage more wrist on that slice versus blocking the ball back, or return blocking the ball back there. It's going to be more shoulder dominant. Same with the volley. If I hit a deep volley, a high volley, and it's kind of deep in the court, it has some spin on it, it's kind of a tough volley, I'm going to guide it more here with a shoulder swing. I'm going to go bang, a shoulder volley in transition, versus if I'm right at the net, I'm close to the net and the ball is really soft, I'm trying to put that ball through the court, I'm going to go bang. You see how, even like on a mini overhead, abbreviated overhead, see how much wrist snap I'm going to get? Bang, right? Because I'm going to snap that ball down. Now, I just want to, again, give you some more non-forehand, but practical examples. McEnroe as the volley at the net. Obviously on the overhead, there's a ton of wrist right there. And same with the high floating backhand wrist right there. All right, but on all the volleys, again, the wrist doesn't extend nearly as much because there's pace. Again, but he's still engaging at contact, he's still engaging that muscle. Now, like all of these vary on a case-by-case basis. It's pretty subtle, like that return and a lot of shoulder. The ground strokes are a little bit more balanced with a little bit more wrist, okay? And again, it's just subtle changes. Now the short ball, a little extra wrist to get that spin up and down, again, to set up to finish the overhead. And here's another practical case I really like that went to use a little bit more wrist. Okay, so these are more normal ground strokes. Again, when the ball came deep there, I just used a little bit more shoulder. Now to punish this slice, I use a little bit more wrist, right, to hit the gas, accelerate that wrist. Last one here, you see Fed on the return, just block that ball with more shoulder. Now angle, need more spin. That's when the wrist comes out. Okay, now the question is, what's right for you? Okay, we talk about these two distinctions. What's right for you? So there's a lot of preference here. Look, if you execute anything well enough, whether you're shoulder dominant or wrist dominant, execution above all. If you do it well, okay, it's better than choosing one or the other. But look, my question for you is, do you have naturally stronger shoulders? Do you have naturally stronger forearms? So it depends on your strength. It depends on your play style. It depends on your grip. All these things matter. Now, Federer, now getting back to Federer, like I said, in 2005, he had more of a shoulder dominant swing here. In 2013, he used a lot more wrist in his forehand, bang here, to get more spin. 2018, again, I'm just conjecturing here, but when he switched to the RF racket, it was a little thicker, a touch heavier. He couldn't, even Federer has a crazy strong form. It was a little harder for Federer just to flick that slightly heavier racket. I mean, he still uses a lot of wrist lag and wrist extension, but not quite as much as 2013, if you're looking closely at the details. All right, but like everyone wants a Federer forehand. Everyone wants to, get the wrist lag and the racket head speed and this big shoulder coil also. But remember, a lot of technique is predicated around strength. If you don't have the strength, you won't be able to execute the technique. So it really depends on a case-by-case basis. So I'm not saying you shouldn't aspire to have a Federer forehand, but the thing is, even if you can shadow a Federer forehand with the perfect form, is you can't execute without the right amount, of strength, the right amount of coordination and balance. Again, and he's the full package. Now I get it, right? It's hard to compare yourself to Roger Federer, and like, how can you actually apply the concept of wrist versus shoulder dominance? And so that's why I just wanted to include a little demo of a student, who was tinkering around with the shoulder versus wrist dominant swing. And here, the wrist dominant swing right there. There's not a whole lot of body moving except for the bicep and wrist, and that's quite a bit of power. Again, not a whole lot of shoulder loaded. It's just firing those last two muscles really hard and getting a lot of extension on the wrist. Now this is a shoulder swing. Now you're going to see another shoulder swing coming up here, again with the bigger loop. The student experimented for a few weeks and eventually found something in the middle, so a good balance. Last question I want to leave you with, okay, is why did Federer, because look, Federer knows, I bet you Federer knows everything about tennis. Why did he switch from a more shoulder dominant swing to wrist dominant swing? Okay, this is where, again, I'm kind of throwing some things out. I don't know exactly. Well, in 2003, 2004, 2005, again, you see a lot of the players, Agassi, they have a more shoulder-based swing. Sampras, has a more shoulder-based swing here. Everyone had a more, Murat Safin had a more shoulder-based swing. Everyone used more shoulder-based swings because at that time the courts were a little bit faster. So what did that mean? Hitting hard and flat and being able to deflect pace were better attributes and qualities to have in a swing, at least on the Pro Tour. And so you can see Federer, bang, have that more shoulder-based swing. Then you see the rise of Nadal, Djokovic, and Murray. And again, these guys all hit a little bit more spin and height, not as much through the court. And so when the court slowed down and the ATP realized, again, there's money pretty much driving a lot of the decisions at the top. When the ATP said, oh, people like longer rallies. People want to watch long 30-hit rallies. But the game slowed down. The Wimbledon added grass where the ball bounced up higher. The ball was a little softer, and by virtue of having softer balls in the court, well, it didn't make sense. You didn't need as much, I guess, you can call it ability to deflect pace. Then you had Federer go to more of a stroke that created pace and spin with the wrist dominance. And so then you see him kind of come back slightly more in the middle, but now they're speeding the clay up again, where hitting a little harder on the clay works because it's not as slow. So you can kind of see the progression. It's based on the elements. But again, this is a very nuanced point. If you're just starting in tennis and you're just working on your swing, again, don't try to get a little extra shoulder or wrist extension. Try to get the basic fundamentals down and slowly work this in, add this in over time. All right, that really wraps up for today. I appreciate you guys for watching. Again, hit that subscribe button right over there. We'll see you very soon.